All right, we'll wait a couple more moments for folks to trickle in, everything to catch up on LinkedIn. I see it popping up as we speak, which is great. Well, welcome everybody. We appreciate you spending some time with us on a Friday. Today we're going to be going through considerations for driving order management success with NetSuite in the food and beverage industry. I'm joined with my partner in crime, Glenn Saunders, COO over here at Nuage. And today we'll be going through a couple tips and tricks, top 10 considerations. But as all of you know, the fast-paced, perishable world of food and beverage, order management is a make or break function, to say the least. And delays in fulfillment, inaccurate allocations, poor communication can severely impact customer satisfaction, especially during seasonal spikes. As most of you probably have, NetSuite as a cloud ERP platform, you're probably well aware that NetSuite for food and beverage companies is a powerful tool, if used correctly, to streamline order processes, reduce your manual efforts, increase fulfillment accuracy, the list goes on. So for companies to really automate their order management, they've reported significant reductions in processing time during peak seasons, which is a critical challenge, I think, for most, especially right now and going into the seasonal spikes when every hour counts. So as noted, we'll be covering the top 10 considerations for leveraging NetSuite to drive efficient, scalable, customer-focused order management operations. If you have questions, please ask away and we'll try to get to them in the comments. But without further ado, Glenn, you want to give a quick intro? Tell folks about what you're working on, who you are, and we'll get into the top 10 if that works for you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, as always. Thanks with you. And so I'm Glenn Saunders, COO here at Nuage, and I have about 20 years in ERP consulting experience across a wide variety of domains. Been doing a lot in food and beverage really the last decade as NetSuite's evolved with its manufacturing capabilities specific to food and beverage. But I also come from a background of other technologies. I've done Microsoft Dynamics, I've done some Epicor stuff. So not just pigeonholed into knowing NetSuite, do have some understanding of what other ERP systems and capabilities are. And yeah, look forward to chatting with you today on some of the things around order management, allocations, and how NetSuite works for its customers.
Well, thank you, Glenn. And why don't we start with seasonal order allocation strategy? So NetSuite with the demand planning, allocation rules. Can you walk us through what you see, what works best, what you recommend for folks who may have a strategy in place, who may just be using good old Excel, and your recommendations there?
Yeah, so a couple of things to consider is distribution channels that you're going to prioritize. A lot of our customers will have direct to consumer, and then they'll have through distribution channels, they'll have direct to the business as well. And you've got to determine what the prioritization is of those different sales channels. And NetSuite provides some tool sets around that, around supply allocation. You can set up different rules. You can have how it allocates and reallocates inventory as other orders come in. That's kind of step one, is determining how you're going to make those determinations. And then it really gets into setting up the system so that you can automate some of that. There's always going to be a level potentially of somebody's got to look at certain allocations as they come in and get reviewed and firm them up or kick them out. But NetSuite does provide a lot of tool sets around automation of allocation. And then the other side of that is we talk about the perishability of the materials, is setting up FIFO allocations so that you're first expire, first out based on shipment date, and using that to properly manage your inventory as best as you can to get stuff out as quickly as possible with the oldest expiry date, or most recent expiry date, I should say, closest expiry date. Those are some of the key considerations when looking at how you're going to manage order allocation strategies within NetSuite.
Super helpful. And I think kind of dovetailing into real-time inventory visibility. You know, I think this is kind of a core component, core offering of what NetSuite touts is why you should have NetSuite ERP in the first place. Easier said than done. Could you walk us through how you get there, and what best in class looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the critical factors in the food and beverage industry, particularly, a lot of them use third-party warehouses, right? Because the cost to set up warehouses across the country when you have perishability or cold storage, which is super expensive. You know, most people have Americold or other types of providers to do that. Is if you really want real-time inventory visibility, how tightly synced are you with those other providers where you're getting accurate real-time data, whether it be via EDI, API integration, real-time inventory level syncs. You know, we've done quite a bit of this, even not necessarily in food and beverage, but in more apparel type with the 3PL model of helping customers sync real-time across all their various channels to see inventory. So you really have to start with a strategy of how do we get all this together? If you're just using core NetSuite, it's just about speed of order entry. Those are simple. But when you're managing third-party logistics, it gets just so much more complicated so that you have those options to know where you don't have to go log into this system. In this system, you're really using one central dashboard, which is NetSuite, to manage that. So there are some integrations to be considered when you're going that route. And that's something we help a lot of our customers out with.
Super helpful. I think that kind of dovetails into the fulfillment workflows, suite flow capabilities. How do I automate my fulfillment workflows?
Yeah, so starts with the allocation process, and kind of having pre-built rules around how things get slotted, ordered. And then if you're using, you know, NetSuite's wave order management process, you can have scheduled wave releases that will just go ahead and generate on predefined timelines so that it gets out to the floor as quickly as possible. Now, I know in reality, a lot of organizations, depending on how they structure things, with a 3PL, you're just making sure the order, wherever the order is gets to them as quickly as possible in a lot of scenarios. But if you're basically, a lot of them will have wave picking where they're picking for various orders. They're pricing out freight if they don't have their own trucks. So you've got to consider all of those situations of the timing of an order comes in by this time, it gets fulfilled the next day, those types of things. So having cutoff periods that can say and slot when things will get fulfilled, which is pretty easily doable in NetSuite with either, you know, workflows or other elements. But then using some of the native features and functionality around wave order management and picking, FIFO lot allocation, so that you're not having to manually intervene. You're really only having to do that by exception and focus on the 20% that are going to cause you headaches instead of the 80% that just should flow right through the system.
That's, I think, for folks joining in, and sorry, I don't know why I glitched out for a quick second there, but for the top three, you know, for folks just tuning in, we've covered seasonal order allocation strategy, getting into the real-time inventory visibility, and really just focusing on the automation and fulfillment workflows. Let's dive deeper into the intelligence side. We covered EDI. We want to cover that a little bit more. Customer communication portals. Seems like every food and beverage organization I work with really underutilizes CRM. Well, it is a customer repository at times. Folks often forget, like, hey, I get CRM in NetSuite for free. You know, I have to pay for a user, of course, but very underutilized in the application and very strong capabilities in CRM. Can you walk us through just customer communication portals, what's available, what best in class looks like there as well? And Glenn, I think you're on mute.
Sorry, kind of prevent feedback. there's a lot of different options on that. Whether you're using native Suite Commerce My Account, which is somewhat limited, and then of course you can stair step up to the various Suite Commerce elements. You know, we have customers that use a wide variety of different portals based on what they're looking to communicate. I've recommended, you know, a craft solution before, which is my previous company. It's named something else now. I can't remember the name, but they have a great solution, you know, off the shelf. I think the critical thing is what you're trying to communicate to your customers. Is it orders? Is it delivery dates? And making that easily consumable for them, because you're going to have some customers that will love it, some customers that will never log into the system. So you have to be mindful and not over engineer those types of things, in my opinion, personally, because I think you can spend a lot of money and get very little value if you aren't really purpose built for what you're trying to accomplish with those. But those are, you know, a couple of options. We've got people that have bespoke ones. You can use third-party platforms that you're just integrating data from. I mean, that is one of the beauties of NetSuite, is the ability to integrate data into the platform is pretty easy. What I mean is integrate to third parties like that. It's not a gargantuan task to have data flow between multiple things. It's one of the powers that NetSuite really allows organizations to take advantage of.
You know, I think something that's come a long way, but often not easy, is integrating EDI. You know, integrations with your Amazon, Shopify, Walmarts of the world, and I don't want to go down the KE or KeyHe or whatever that K hole is. But you know, I think talking through, you know, you got SPS, you got True Commerce, you got a couple other players out there. We see the need for EDI. Integrating EDI is oftentimes a pretty gargantuan exercise. Thoughts there? When is it needed? Why is it needed? What does best in class look like?
Yeah, I think the big thing on EDI is it can be super helpful. It can save a ton of time, money, and increase opportunities for organizations. But there is a cost to it. And to me, it's about the ROI. You know, which are your providers? Some are going to require it. And a lot of organizations will do what we call manual EDI, where they log into a system, they key in their stuff. They're doing EDI, but they're doing it manually. When you get to the next level and you're automating those types of things, it will benefit you, but you have to make sure that it's worth the time. The time and the money you're going to have to invest in it. It's usually a good idea. I say that because it's not always the best idea, because it can cost more than you're, you know, selling through to get those types of things set up. So you have to be mindful of the investment that it's going to take, and just build your ROI case. I mean, to me, that's any of the stuff that we see is, I always want customers to consider what are your expected returns from the investment you're going to make in the software and services that we're going to deliver. Because if there's not a case there, you'll end up with that unhappy customer because they don't have a clear vision of what they're hoping to achieve. It doesn't mean that you don't evolve that over time and things don't shift. That absolutely occurs. But you have to have some sense of where you're trying to go to make sure you get the return you're looking for. And I think EDI is no different. How much money are you intending to save, or are you intending to, you know, sell through in an additional manner that's going to benefit the business? And you have to approach it from that perspective.
Well said. Well said. Shipping and carrier integration is kind of the same, right? You got your ShipHawks, your PaceJets, RF Smart of the world. The list goes on. NetSuite native WMS. You know, the rate shopping, the label printing. Efficiencies to be gained there. When and how should I be looking at, you know, the shipping and the carrier integration? What do you see? Especially as we tie into EDI to a certain extent as well.
Yeah, you know, just had a call not too long ago about integrating, somewhat of a light integration with a third party doing this. And so it again, you know, what are the efficiencies that you hope to gain? What is the cost? And what are the cost savings? A lot of times with the rate shopping, you're really looking at a cost savings of, I'm going to save a certain amount of money on my freight. And we aren't getting into the chargebacks aspect of this, of various components, that you're going to get chargebacks on. And
let's skip that part. I don't want to talk chargebacks.
All of that fun stuff. But, I think looking at the use case and where you're spending, how much money you're spending on those things, what are your major carriers and where could you benefit from? And a lot of times it just comes down to negotiation. I mean, obviously UPS and FedEx have their default, but if you're going through brokerage and third parties, look at how much your spend is and see if you can negotiate better rates. You can talk to them about additional opportunity that you may work better with them to mitigate some of your costs. And also planning, I think, is critical in logistics. If everything's a rush order, you're going to cost yourself a lot of time, money, and effort usually. So being thoughtful in how you go about those types of things and planning your logistics and your strategy for managing your logistics is critical.
So I know we have a couple of additional suggestions. I think we've covered most of the gamut as it relates to really driving order management success in NetSuite. I want to end with demand forecasting and planning, and of course, I think our favorite, Kazi AI. But from a demand planning MRP standpoint, what do you see that works? How do I get there if I'm brand new to NetSuite? What point does it make sense? Should I be doing it in an Excel doc? Can you just give us your take on when can I really be proactive and smart with demand forecasting and planning in NetSuite?
Yeah, so with native NetSuite does a good job with MRP forecasting. It's not perfect by any scenario. It's got some limitations, as we well know, but it can tell you based on the supply chain that you've set up in the system when you need to order, what you need to order. The critical piece is telling it what your demand's going to be. And unfortunately, NetSuite doesn't have a driver-based demand forecasting system natively to it. And don't tell me planning and budgeting is native. It's not. It's an integration. That's a separate application. And so once you get that foundation down, now if you're just looking at prior history and using that to forecast out demand, my general recommendation is use reports from NetSuite, manipulate it in Excel as you want to, and then suck it back in as a demand forecast. I hate to say it, but accountants and people that work with software a lot of times it's easy to manipulate stuff inside of Excel, pipe the data back into NetSuite from a demand perspective. That may not be best practices, and people can drag me through the mud for that if they want to. But it works for a reason that you need to run scenario planning. And if you're not going to invest in a full FP&A system that has capabilities to do driver-based demand planning, that is a great alternative. And so from that, then taking that information, running through the MRP scenario, it's really about getting the demand right. Because if you screw up the demand, then you're going to over or under order and mess yourself up. And people think, a lot of times people like to think that they're just going to set up MRP and click a run button and it'll just tell them everything they need to do. That couldn't be further from the truth. It's going to automate a lot of the steps and the processes for you, but you still have to review, manage, and make sure that exceptions are reviewed and you don't make mistakes. Somebody accidentally fat fingers a 1, puts an extra 0 in, and 100 becomes 1,000. That could cost you tons of money by over ordering because of what that manual error that happened. So unfortunately, humans are not perfect, and so we have to validate the information that goes into the systems. But I think most organizations underutilize the MRP capability because it somewhat scares them from what they think it's going to do. And I think there's an easy way to kind of crawl, walk, run into that and get some of that value.
Well, humans certainly are not perfect, and that brings up Causey AI. As robots will be taking over our jobs sooner than later. Can you walk us through just decision intelligence with Causey AI, what it's doing, what it is, and really how it can affect order management, specifically on the demand forecasting scenario capabilities?
Yeah. And as I've been more skeptical of AI, I've certainly come around in the past 6 to 9 months. It's quite amazing to see what it is able to do from you have your data sets and it's extracting every bit of data in NetSuite. And, any business intelligence is just that revenue went up or down X% last month. Causey, you can ask why. What were the drivers behind it? Why did my cost increase 10%? Well, you had this type of expense. Well, why is that expense here? And why wasn't it here last year? So you can start to ask this system and it can learn along with you, like, what are the key drivers of it? And the same goes with order pattern history and understanding if you've got risk in your business model from a revenue perspective and what steps you can take to mitigate that. So, we've been on a couple of calls with Josh and it's, hey, what should be my strategy for tariff management? And the system can literally give you some ideas. Now, is it perfect? And can you just click a button and have it implemented in NetSuite? No. There still needs to be a review, a human thought process around how things work and how things need to go. But it's quite exceptional what it can do. And it just cuts down the time to those decisions. So instead of having to have financial analysts comb through data for 3 weeks after month end, you just ask the model what happened and why, right? So it removes a lot of that necessary analysis that has to happen because it's just automated. And then you can get some, if you want to to interface with outside data, you can too. And you can start to marry that up with outside causal data from your ERP system to make it even smarter, which is where I think that's where you're going to get tremendous value. Because it's not just what's happening in your system, it's what's happening elsewhere in the world. What are the key driving factors that are going to generate a lot of value?
Yeah.
And to circle back to just the food and beverage, since a lot of the food and beverage distributors do sell through Key Foods or Key Foods and Unify, you don't necessarily know where it ends up, but you can get that data from third-party systems. So then you pump that into Causey and I'm selling really hot right now in Greenville, Mississippi, but I'm not in Greenville, South Carolina. Why is that? Right? So you can start to interface with outside data that you may not have a complete picture of your capabilities within NetSuite or your actual sales data.
Yeah. Oh, well said. Well, that's all we've got for today. Certainly appreciate everybody spending some time with us, going through considerations for driving order management success with NetSuite and food and beverage industry. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Glenn or myself. Probably Glenn for the more technical stuff. With that, I think it's just, food and beverage companies, you need effective order management. It's about more than just processing the transactions, right? And, NetSuite provides a platform to automate, adapt, and grow. And you need a team who can help you do that. Our team at Nuage is well equipped to help you, and we've got some awesome use cases, customer testimonials. We encourage you to reach out. So without further ado, I'll wrap things up. And Glenn, thank you for your time. I hope everybody has a great weekend.
Yeah, thanks for having me as always. And if anybody has any questions, certainly reach out. Happy to have a discussion and talk through, and hopefully our team can help out.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a good one.